Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Brent Thierry of Total Spine Health and Injury Center in Maple Grove, and today I want to touch on an area of injury and healing that is very common but is also very commonly misunderstood, and that is post-traumatic soft tissue healing. This is things like car accidents, work injuries, sports injuries, falls, and really anything that causes a direct injury to the tissue. Now, to really gain an understanding of how tissue heals and how it's repaired, we need to look at the underlying physiology. I know, boring, but important. So I want to do my best today to get you to understand these underlying concepts in the most interesting way that I can. So hang with me. So the most common and really the most impactful misconceptions around soft tissue healing are really the following. Number one, injured soft tissue like muscle, tendon, ligaments will heal in a period of roughly 4 to 8 weeks. And number two, soft tissues will heal spontaneously on their own without any long-term residual damage, and no treatment is really necessary. Now, unfortunately, if you've been involved in something like a car accident or a similar trauma, there's a good chance you may have heard these exact things, which is both confusing and inaccurate. So let's address the misconceptions around healing time first. So real healing takes place in 3 specific phases, and the time frame for that healing is actually closer to around 12 months. So it goes without saying that there's a big difference in treatment and outcomes when you compare a recovery time of 4 to 8 weeks with a recovery time of 12 months. So let's break down those phases so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the first phase of this healing process is the inflammatory phase, which lasts approximately 72 hours following an injury. Now, during this phase, a few different things happen. Along with the inflammation, there's often associated bleeding of the injured tissues. As this process continues and inflammation increases, it's often the reason why we can feel worse each day following an injury. Now, because of the bleeding, it means there is often damage to the local vascular structures, and as a result, there's insufficient amount of things like oxygen, glucose, and ATP, which is the energy that the cells use and the energy that they need to initiate the process to repair the wound. There are also things during this phase called fibroblasts, and they begin accumulating in the injured area, but they can't really start doing their job until the damaged blood vessels have healed, which is roughly that following that first 72-hour inflammatory period. Now, once the body can start delivering the oxygen and the glucose it needs for ATP, the fibroblasts can begin synthesizing the collagen that it will need to begin repairing the tissue. Most people know this more commonly as scar tissue. And this is really where we transition to the second phase of soft tissue healing, which is the regeneration phase. This is where those fibroblasts begin to manufacture collagen protein, which sort of acts like a glue to fill in and bridge the gaps between the torn tissues. Now, this goes on for approximately 6 to 8 weeks, and at the end of this phase, the gaps in the torn tissue are more than 90% bridged. Now, unfortunately, this is where a lot of the confusion actually stems from in terms of the time it takes for tissues to heal. People think that this regeneration is the same as repair, and that once that process is over, the healing process is over as well, when in fact it isn't. There's actually an additional phase of healing that still needs to take place, known as the remodeling phase. The remodeling phase is the third and final phase of healing, and it's often overlooked. So during the regeneration phase, the collagen fibers, they're laid down, but it's in a very irregular pattern. This irregularity affects the overall strength and mobility of the tissue. During the remodeling phase, those fibers can change their orientation in response to the direction of the stress and strain that is placed on the tissues. This means that the tissue can become stronger and more flexible as it remodels to a more regular pattern like the original undamaged tissue. This is why proper treatment during this phase of remodeling is critically important if we want to get the best end product in terms of healing. The tissue will continue to regain strength and alignment for approximately 1 year from the date of the injury. And this effectively transitions us into the second misconception around tissue healing, and that is that the tissue will heal spontaneously on its own. Yes, it will regenerate on its own, but it won't reach its optimal end product without therapeutic intervention. Since the collagen fibers will remodel as a byproduct of stress and strain of the joints and tissues, the question should become, how can we challenge those tissues to encourage them to regain their proper orientation? And that's where chiropractic treatment can be extremely effective. Now, chiropractic adjustments put motion into those joints and tissues in an effort to restore function, as well as to get those tissues configured properly along the direction of stress and strain. Therapeutic massage treatments can also be incorporated in this process as well in an effort to encourage proper soft tissue healing and remodeling. And as a result, we end up with an end product of healing that is stronger and more elastic, as opposed to simply allowing those tissues to heal on their own. So let's sum it up. Soft tissue healing happens in 3 distinct phases. The first 72 hours is the inflammatory phase. The 6 to 8 weeks following an injury are the regeneration phase, and the remodeling phase follows for roughly 12 months after the date of injury. The remodeling phase is incredibly important for challenging the tissues to get them to reconfigure properly, ultimately allowing the tissue to regain strength and flexibility. Thanks for hanging with me. Hopefully you not only stayed awake, but you learned a little bit too. If you've been injured, check out our office, Total Spine Health and Injury Center, to learn more about what we can do to help.